racial horror. This is my framework. I always address people by the first name. It's easier for me, and I think it's a familiar setting, so we can do that. So Amy is an analytical thinker, and she's a designer of systems. She gains great pleasure from improving upon existing techniques with the objective of maximizing efficiency and cost effectiveness. Work for Amy, which we'll talk a bit more about it, is the process of striving towards something that matters deeply to her and is consistent with her values. And this also applies to her home life. We'll be asking you more about your experience, so I won't be saying more about you. We also have Anne with us. You've already heard a little bit from Anne. Anne is the managing director, partner, and the head of Marine Litigation Department of Fenwick and Fenwick Associates in Malta. This is a medium-sized organization, and I was very glad to hear 60 of your 95 people are women, and they're there because they're good. They're good women, not because they're women. We have Michelle, who is Chief Human Resources Officer at Go. She's responsible for all human resources within this company and industrial relations within the group. She has a professional career in telecommunications, education, automotive, manufacturing sectors, both in Europe and North America. We also have Antoinette Caruana with us. Currently, Antoinette is the company secretary and the group HR manager for Fasten's group of companies. She's also a member of the group executive board. Antoinette is also quite known to us Maltese, especially the ones of us who work and are active in human resource management. She's also currently a director in the Central Bank of Malta. And we have Ron with us. Ron is the director and company secretary of Uppingham First. He is also the national patron of women in management in the UK, regional chair of the UK Charter Management Institute, and former town mayor of Uppingham. And he'll be telling us more about you as well. The first thing I'd like to ask you is tell us a little bit more about your experience of being a parent and being in management, but also other than simply your experience, how do you feel about it? And have you ever felt that being a parent makes you in any way different from a non-parent in management? I don't know who of you would like to start off. I just would like some brief answers. And ready to go.
The magic touch. Okay, right. Okay, Tom. Right. Thank you, Anna Maria. Well, as I said earlier, I qualified in 1986, and 1 week after I qualified, I started working immediately after having got married. No kids at that point. My eldest was born 5 years later, so I had already worked as a marine litigation lawyer with a London law firm for 5 years. Therefore, in the city, in London, and therefore having children, really, was pretty normal. And as far as the work and the thinking at work was concerned, just because you have a child certainly did not mean that you would even contemplate stopping from working. And therefore, that is the background to why it was that when Matthew was born in 1991, I took a couple of weeks off my work. I was involved in a very big case at the time. My husband was also a doctor in a hospital in Sidcup, so we had access to nursery nurses. So I was very lucky that Matthew could be deposited with the nursery nurses at Sidcup Hospital at the time, and I just continued working. So I approached the matter in a very matter-of-fact way. Matthew was born. Matthew was in exceptionally good hands. I loved my work. I feel very passionate about my work. 26 years later, I'm still very passionate about my work. And I think that is the issue here. Are women passionate enough about what they do? And when I say about what they do, whether it's work or whether it's rearing children, because at the end of the day, it's exactly as Marlene said, there will be women who prefer to stay at home and look after their children. And that is perfectly all right. You know, I don't believe we ought to have an atmosphere where we are going to make women who stay at home feel as though they're not making or taking the right decision. If that is the right decision for them, that's fine. However, back to your question, how does parenting and working come into the equation? When I went to New Orleans and I did exactly the same thing for a couple of years, found somebody to look after Matthew, and then we came back to Malta and I had somebody look after Matthew at home. My modus vivendi was always, as long as my husband, because we've left these species out of the equation so far, nobody's spoken about husband, very important. As long as my husband and my children were well looked after, then my message to ladies who want to go out there into the workplace, particularly ladies who then grow in stature to take on management positions, is go for it. Go for it. However, you do have to set your own house in order. Because when you are at work, when I go to my place of work every day, I don't even think about what's going on at home. Now, if you are at your place of work and you have got a management responsibility, you can't afford to be thinking of the husband and the kids. Of course, you love them to bits, but you are at your place of work, end of story. So you know, my message is that the woman concerned has to take a decision as to whether or not her profession or her working life is important to her. If it's important to her, and if she feels fulfilled as an individual, and she has a huge contribution to make, if that is the case, then she needs to find solutions that would suit her. And that is, I think, how I managed to combine parenting with working. Of course, when it comes to management, you're upping the ante there, because it's already fairly stressful, or I don't even think stressful is the right word. I think the responsibility, of course, is greater when you have a demanding career and a family. Let's not elude ourselves here.
The advantage of being 66 years old, older than anyone here probably, certainly, is that I can look backwards now and see in what have I actually practiced in my life as against what have I talked about. And I've been very fortunate to be involved in public services, including European Social Dialogue during my professional career, and then become a regional director in public services, which allowed me then to put into practice some of the things I believed. So yes, by chance I was involved in helping to create some of the first women's networks in public services in the northeast of England, and have now met Sandra and others later in life and got involved in the same issues but in a different way. So from a personal point of view, as an employer, I was in the business, for example, of drafting contracts. So all of us can make a contribution in a different way, but I got the opportunity in the very early days of the internet, for example, when employers were saying, how can we punish women and men who, you know, would play at work with the internet rather than work. So why not write into the contract an entitlement to, let's say, an hour a day to make use of that technology for your private life? So I was involved in drafting contracts, just little steps towards making work-life balance a little more helpful. By the time I became regional director, I led a regional team of 10, 9 of whom were women, and I quickly learned, of course, who really knows what they're talking about. I would say that to be able to demonstrate good practice in your business life, it goes back to what a colleague said earlier, it starts in your private life and your family life. What values and what practices have you exhibited? I'm very proud of the fact that I have 2 children. My daughter is a leader of a school, a head teacher in a school, a large school, and she would find it rather strange for anybody to suggest that a man might actually determine her future direction. She is married, she has a house husband in part, although he's a tennis coach and has other interests, but she very much is the driver of her household as well as her workplace. And my son, who's forecasting manager for the post office in England, is someone who gave up many promotion opportunities because he wanted to see his children when they were young. And because that involved moving around the country, he said, no, thank you, I'd rather stay where I am, because I think that's an important part of our children's lives. So that was a very courageous thing to do, and no doubt he could have been even more senior had he not done that. So I look back at my children with some pride and say, between my wife and myself, there are little bits of what we believe in there. Margaret's here. I'm the only one, I believe, who has a witness, so I'm only allowed to tell the truth. She is also a senior manager in education service, now retired. And I've lived through a time of European policy, through change.
About businesses that are high performing, that make them stand out from their competitors. What is it about businesses like ours really that really trailblaze and set the path that makes them successful? And I think one of the overriding factors is the culture of that business and its ability to select people who share its vision and values. Great companies of the world have people that have a great psychological contract with them. It's not about the policy and a bit of paper. It's about inspiring people who think like them to work with them. And so I think one of the things we need to look at when we look at family-friendly enterprises is how embedded is it really in that business? Do we really believe passionately that by introducing cultural diversity, gender diversity, that we can create opportunities in business? And that's what I try and help people to do in their own businesses. And from my own personal experience, I broke the system. When I had my little boy, I was a young one, 18, when I had my little boy. He was born at 26 weeks. There's an all there. He was £1 8 ounces, that's slightly less than a bag of sugar, and was the same size as an Action Man, just to put this into some context for you. And my employer at the time, and I was only doing a part-time call centre role, my employer at the time said, you can't have maternity leave yet. You're not allowed maternity leave until you're 28 weeks pregnant. And I said, well, he's here. He's arrived. I can't put him back. We tried that. What's it going to work? What do you want me to do for 2 weeks? So I went on the sick. I was laid off work on the sick. It was an interesting time, I can say. My little boy was in hospital for 3.5 months, so the opportunity to go back to work was restricted, certainly for that period. I also, when he came home from hospital, he still had some medical needs, and I work a lot with parent carers, parents who've got children with disabilities. And quite often that brings another element into the mix, because the traditional nursery or the traditional childcare provider panics a bit when you turn up with an oxygen tank and heart monitoring equipment and such like. They're used to bottles and nappies, and that throws a spanner in the works. So I had some decisions to make at that time in my life as a young new mum. I was a single parent as well, just to add to the joys of it all. And it was at that point that I made a decision to embark on a management career. So up until this point, there was no degree, there was no career path in place. But it made sense to me to provide for my son, to be an inspiration. I wanted him to grow up to respect the role of a woman in the household. I didn't want him to think that, you know, women should be provided for in the traditional sense, but that we were equal and empowered to be equal. So that's when I went to university, did my degree, decided that, you know, the best way to showcase how brilliant women could be was to be as brilliant as I could be, regardless of my situation. And I hope that, you know, as he grows up, he will see that actually that's a possibility for anybody. I think that now, as he's aged 10, it's normal for him. I do have a partner now, and we have 2 more children relationship also, who are both older, and I think that they do see that my partner and I have equally important roles in the house in terms of who does the washing up, who picks the Hoover up on a Sunday morning, but who earns the money. You know, it's an equal partnership in our world, and that's one that I am proud of, and I hope that our boys will go on to look for in their future relationships as well. So that's a quick summary of my experiences of the world, but my hope for the future is that we find ways to make enterprising businesses profitable, and that includes focus on diversity and empowerment for people who have maybe not had the most traditional course.
Thank you very much, Amy, for this very interesting background to also how you've turned a situation which was quite difficult in your life to actually give you the stimulus to go forward and have a path in what you are passionate about, but also what you like to see change, and that is quite inspirational.